Subscribe our channel and press the bell icon for watching more video.
In this section, we will talk about returns. So far, we have seen how to procure services, non-stock items, stock items, and all along, we have just been receiving goods into our inventory. But what if something goes wrong? Let me give you some examples. Say you receive 100 pounds of flour or sugar, and the vendor sends it to you in two 50 kilo bags. Say one of the bags is torn, or the flour has gone bad, the sugar has gone bad. What do? You don't use it, right? What do? You return it to the vendor. How do you do returns? This is just one scenario. There are many other scenarios for returns. We will see the different scenarios for returns in this section. The simplest is called as a return delivery. So what is a return delivery? Let's take the same case. Coffee gone bad or sugar gone bad. And start all the way from the beginning. So there is a PO, right? That's for, say, 100 kilos of coffee. And the PO is received. So goods comes in. The 100 kilos comes in. And you do an invoice receipt. So basically this completes the steps from a P2P perspective. The invoice is paid, of course, that's a finance step. We don't care. So the goods is received, goods is in the warehouse, and then somebody went in and wants to use that 100 kilo coffee or 50 kilo coffee. But what they found out is the coffee has gone bad. It's gone stale or whatever. Now we want to return one of the 50 kilo bags. What do? We call the vendor and say, hey, you know what, one of the 50 kilo bags is gone bad. We wish to return it. Typically, there is a very long-term relationship between suppliers and companies. The vendor says, no problem. The next time the truck comes in, send it over and I'll replace it. Right? So, the first step that we are going to do is create POGRIR, and after that we're going to return 50 kilos of coffee, right? So let's do that. All right, so we're going to create these three steps: number 1, number 2, and number 3. Create the purchase order first. Vendor 4001, material coffee beans, quantity 100. Right? That's it. Save. We've got our PO. Copy it. Now by this point, you should be very well versed with the basics of POGRIR. So that's the reason why I'm not going into the details. If you are not well versed, then you better go back to the previous chapters. All right, so go back, go to goods movement. Now we are doing step number 2 here. Now this step is done. We have ordered for 100 kilos of coffee. Now after some time, the goods are coming in. And that's what we're going to do now. We are going to receive the goods. So put the purchase order number that we copied in there. Enter. And how much did we receive? We received 100 kilos. We are saying item OK. And where did we receive it? Into our coffee storage location. And save. Okay, so the material document is posted. So step number 2 is done. Now we are going to do step number 3, which is receiving the invoice. So we have raised a purchase order, received the goods, And after some time, of course, we got to pay. And to pay, we have to receive the invoice. So the vendor is now going to send the invoice. And we're going to receive it into the system. How do you do that? Miro. Then when did we receive the invoice? This is the invoice date against this purchase order. Hit enter. And we are receiving an invoice for a quantity of 100, right? And what's the amount? $1,000. So we're going to put an amount of $1,000 here. Hit enter and save it. All right. Our invoice is saved. Let's go back to the PO. Hit enter and see the purchase order history. Now remember, purchase order history is where you see all the transactions that has happened to that purchase order. Now what has happened here? We have created a GR, we have created an IR. Let's see if those transactions are tacked on to the purchase order. Purchase order history. And of course you see the material document, which is the goods receipt, and the invoice that we have created. Okay, so far so good. The transaction is complete. Now, remember, the goal of this chapter is to do the return. And how do we do the return? Returns, typically inventory-based returns, are done with reference to the GR. So with reference to the GR, you create a return delivery. And where do you do it? In MyGo. So let's do that. So let's copy this material document. Control C. Go back. Now go to MyGo. And instead of a goods receipt, we do a return delivery. Right? Now this is something we are doing for the first time. So pay attention. All along, we have been doing MyGo for goods receipt only. Right? Now MyGo is a transaction that we can use to do so many different things. What are those different things? Returns delivery is one of them. So how do you do a returns delivery? Like I said, with reference to the goods receipt. So we select goods receipt here and we select material document and we paste the material document in here and hit enter. The system automatically pulls the quantity, storage location, plant, and all that stuff. So what this means is you have received a quantity of 100 pounds of coffee or kilos of coffee in this goods receipt. Now what do you want to do? How much do you want to return? Well, you could return the entire 100 quantity, or in our case, we want to return 50 kilos. Remember, we said there are 250 kilo bags that were delivered. One of the bag was gone. So we're going to return one of the bags. Right? Click item OK and click save. Now what does it ask you? It says enter reason for movement. Now, why does it ask you this question? It didn't ask you this question when you're trying to receive the goods. Well, this is a customization behind the scenes. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it when we get to inventory management. But for now, let's just say reason for goods movement. Go there and select a reason why we are returning it. It could be poor quality, but in this case, basically it's damaged, right? So I'm going to say damaged and save. Well, that looks pretty intuitive, right? What we are trying to do is give a reason why we are returning the goods. And why we are putting that reason is pretty obvious, right? When we return goods, you obviously put a reason. You go to Amazon, you return goods, you put a reason there. The thing is broken or it doesn't fit me, stuff like that. All right, so go back, and this step here is complete. And now what's the next step? The next step is to do a credit memo, right? So what's a credit memo? It's something similar to an invoice, but when we receive the goods, we have to pay the vendor. That's called an invoice that we receive from the vendor. But when we return the goods, the vendor is going to give us a credit memo. What's a credit memo? Let me take the Amazon example. If you buy some goods from Amazon, you pay Amazon, right? So Amazon sends you an invoice, you pay Amazon. Well, you just pay it right on the website. But if you think of a B2B scenario, Amazon gives you an invoice, you pay Amazon. But what if you return goods to Amazon? Now, Amazon owes you money, right? In this case, the vendor, ABC Foods 4001, is like Amazon, and you're returning some of the stuff back to Amazon. Now, what happens? The vendor owes you money. So he gives you what's called as a credit note or credit memo. What is a credit memo? It says, I have to pay you so much. Earlier, an invoice says, you have to pay me so much. A credit memo is exact opposite of an invoice. It says, I owe you money. Right? So we need to document the credit memo just like the way we document an invoice. And how do you do that? Same transaction, Myro. And instead of an invoice, select credit memo. See, it's not all that complicated, right? Only these three transactions, purchase order, Myro, MyGo. These are the transactions that we use to create all the P2P steps. Now, what's the amount for? The amount the vendor is going to send the credit memo is for 50 pounds, right? It's not 100 pounds, it's 50 pounds. And the amount is going to be for 500, right? Now, when you change the quantity to 50, you see that the amount does not change. Now, this is weird, right? When you change the quantity, the corresponding amount should change. But it's not changing here. Well, the reason is SAP has left that to us. So if you want that quantity to change according to the amount or vice versa, you can customize it. But SAP says, I'm not going to change it because we don't know what amount the vendor is going to give a credit for. Sometimes the vendor might take some charges. Like if you buy something on Amazon or Best Buy and return it, there is something called as a restocking fee, right? So similarly, there could be some charges that the vendor could levy. So it's not always, a one-to-one relationship between quantity and amount. But if you really want the amount to change with quantity, meaning if you put 50 here, this should automatically go down to 500. 50 into 10, 500. In order for you to see that, there is a parameter that you can change. It's not a configuration. It's a personalization, meaning it doesn't apply to the entire organization. It applies only to you. If you want to have that control, you can have it with a parameter. What is that parameter? Do you want to post? No. Go to personalization using transaction SU3. You could use that, or you could use system, user profile, set data, any of these. Okay, and go to parameters, and over here put in IV amount adjust, and then put an X there and click save. Okay, now go back to Myro. Put your purchase order number in there, and the quantity that we are receiving a credit memo for is 50. Now observe the amount column. So I've just entered 50 and hit enter. You see what happened? The amount automatically changed to the corresponding amount for that quantity. 50 multiplied by 10 is 500. If you put 25, it's going to automatically change to 250. Right? So that's that. We're going to change it back to 50, and we are going to receive that for $500, make the balance as 0, and save it. Right, so we have created this in Miro. So whether it's a goods receipt or a return delivery, you do the transaction in Miro. Whether it's an invoice receipt or credit memo, you do those transactions in Miro. So what have we done now? We have just completed the return of 50 kilos of coffee. And how did we do that? We created a return delivery with respect to PO. This is with respect to material document. This one is with respect to PO. All right. Now let's go back to the PO and see the PO history. So our invoice is complete, or credit memo is complete. Let's go back to the PO. Open the PO and go to purchase order history. You see that? There is a goods movement for 100, which is the inbound receipt. And then there is a goods movement outbound called return delivery for 50. So 50 has gone out of stock. How does it go out of stock? Well, we have created a movement here. But the next time the vendor comes in with his truck and all, he'll take the 50 kilo bag, put it in his truck, and take it back. As simple as that. So it's a pure inventory movement from our perspective. Right? There is no shipment involved. There is no packing, nothing of that sort. There is another way to do these things which involves all the logistics, but let's not discuss that here. This is a simple inventory movement. We receive the goods, we send the goods out. There's no shipping, there's no packing, there's no labeling, any of that stuff. And then we have two invoices. One is an invoice receipt, where we receive an invoice for a quantity of 100, the original invoice. And then we have a credit memo for a quantity of 50. Right? Sorry, let's go to the delivery schedule tab and observe this field called the open quantity. What does it say? It says 50. What does it mean? The original PO was for 100. We needed 100 pounds or kilos of coffee. We have originally received 100 pounds of coffee, right? But we have sent out 50. So we only received a net of 50 pounds of coffee. And what does this mean? This means that we are yet to receive 50 kilos of coffee, right? And that's called as an open quantity. An open quantity basically says we are yet to receive 50 kilos of coffee. How does the system know that? Very simple. 100 minus 50 is 50, right? So whatever was expected is the PO quantity, and whatever we got is the GR quantity, and whatever is remaining, of course, is open quantity. So in the next chapter, we're going to discuss a little bit about this open quantity and how to close it, how to block it, how to mark the delivery as complete, and all that kind of stuff. So like we were discussing in the previous chapter, we have ordered for 100 kilos of flour, and we got 100 kilos of flour. The vendor did send 100 kilos of flour or coffee, and of course he sent an invoice for 100. Very good. But we found out that 50 was defective, so we returned 50. That means we only got a net of 50. And the vendor issued a credit memo for 50. So that's settled. But what about the original requirement of 100 pounds. We needed 100 pounds of coffee, right? That's why we have ordered for 100. But we lost 50 because of a quality issue. So we need 50 more. And that's what was reflected in the open quantity in SAP. This guy over here. It says open quantity is 50. Now, sometimes you might not require that 50. You're like, okay, that's it, that's fine, let it go. But the system does not let it go. It says there is still an open quantity of 50. What are the implications of that open quantity? The implications are the PO still remains open. It's not closed yet. Meaning the PO is not complete because we have asked for 100 and the vendor only delivered 50. So we need 50 more. Now sometimes we might not require the 50 more. We can say, let it go. We might not need the 50 now. We can order it next month. But the system does not know that. The system thinks that we need 50 pounds of coffee. And in order to find out the open POs by vendor or by a number of other such criteria, you can go to this transaction, ME2L, ME2L, hit enter, and select your vendor, and in your scope of parameters, type in WE101. Right? So this shows you the open goods receipt, meaning goods that we are yet to receive. You can select one or more than one vendor and click execute. Remember, our purchase order was 45007193. If we go back here, this is the PO 45007193, and it says 50 is still to be delivered and still to be invoiced, and the original quantity was 100. Right? So this is a report that shows you all the open deliverables from a particular vendor. Now we can let it remain open, meaning we need 50 more is the signal that we are giving the system, and the system assumes that we need 50 more, and the vendor also assumes that we need 50 more because we have ordered for 100. He has delivered only 50, and 50 is yet to come in. So far so good. But like I said, sometimes we don't need the 50. We might want to say, that's fine, we have enough for this month. Let's cancel that remaining 50. So how do you ensure that you close that 50 quantity of PO? You no longer need it, right? So there are a couple of ways to do it. The easiest way to do it is to go to delivery, and I need to go to change mode. Okay. The easiest way to do it is to mark that delivery as complete, that line items delivery as complete. Right? So let's do that. Let's click delivery complete and save. Right? Now if you go to the delivery schedule, do you see an open quantity here? You see, this is blank. Although the purchase order quantity is 100 and the goods receipt is 50, meaning we have asked for 100 and the vendor has delivered 50, there's no open quantity because we have marked that delivery as complete. Now, if you go back to that report and re-execute it like so, you see that PO is gone. The 93 PO is gone. You no longer see it. 9091, there's no 93. That means that the purchase order is no longer open, right? This is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to block that line item. Like how? Let me go back to display change of that PO. Uncheck this flag, which means there's going to be an open quantity of 50, right? As usual. Now you can select that line item like so and block it. You see this lock? So when you block it, see again the open quantity has gone. So what is the difference between blocking and marking the delivery as complete. When you mark the delivery as complete, like here, this means that you're saying, my delivery is complete, you no longer need to worry about it. It's typically final. You don't change it ever, although you have the facility to change it. But when you block it, this could be either temporary or permanent. Although both achieve the same effect, when you lock that line item, you're saying typically you temporarily block certain line items. Why? For example, there is a quality issue and you want to block all the line items in all the purchase orders for that material. You could block that. Or you have already created a purchase order with coffee, flour, sugar, 10 different kinds of materials, but you want to temporarily stop the delivery of a particular material or issuing the PO for that line item, meaning there is coffee, there is sugar, there is flour. Suddenly, the warehouse guy comes up and says, oh, we got enough flour or enough sugar, so don't order that now, but maybe 2 days later. So you have a choice. You can delete that line item or you can block that line item like this. This means that the delivery has not happened, but you're not going to issue that line item as a PO to the vendor. The rest of the line items are going to go as usual. So it's a status flag. It just says that, you're temporarily blocking it. You could later unblock it like so. So it's a temporary way of blocking items so that they're not acted upon further either by us or by the vendor. But delivery complete is a deliberate way of saying, hey, you know what? I think we are done with this line item. So if there is any shortfall, don't worry about filling it. We are good. Right? So these are the two ways. So there is another way. So let's see what we have discussed. We said that out of 100, 50 remained open, and in order to close them, there were 3 methods. We have discussed 2 of them. One was to mark the delivery as complete. The second is to block that line item. And we have seen the differences between these 2. In the next chapter, we are going to talk about something called as delivery tolerance.